The Grand Hall of the Galactic Academy of Sciences sparkled under the soft purple light of 3 moons. Professor Do Young stood at the podium, his silvery skin reflecting the light as he addressed the gathered students. His announcement caused a wave of whispers to spread through the room. For the first time in our history, we will send 3 students to study on Earth, he said, his voice calm but firm. The whispers turned to gasps. Earth, the planet that every young student learned about in their basic survival classes, the planet classified as a death world. In the 3rd row, He-Jin felt his heart race. Unlike his classmates who shrank back in their seats, he leaned forward. His parents had always said his curiosity would either make him famous or get him killed. Earth, with its crushing gravity and deadly atmosphere, had always fascinated him. Next to him, Mayre's color-changing skin flickered between excited yellow and nervous green. She was the top student in xenobiology, and Earth's diverse life forms had been the subject of her dreams and nightmares. The gravity alone is 3 times what we experience here, Professor Do Young continued. The atmosphere is thick with oxygen, a highly reactive and dangerous element. Their oceans cover most of the planet, containing enough water to drown entire civilizations. Taiwan, sitting in the back row, was already making calculations on his datapad. His extra set of arms moved quickly, noting down every detail. As the Academy's most promising engineering student, he saw this as more than an opportunity. It was a challenge. You will need to wear environmental suits at all times, the professor explained. These suits are the only thing that will stand between you and Earth's deadly conditions. One malfunction could be fatal. Instead of fear, these words sparked excitement in the 3 students. He-Jin raised his hand first, followed almost immediately by Mayre and Taiwan. Interesting, Professor Do Young said, his eyes scanning the room. Only 3 volunteers, and exactly 3 spots available. He paused, looking at each of them carefully. Are you sure about this? Earth's humans have evolved to survive conditions that would kill most species in the galaxy. They'd break bones and heal them. They'd breathe oxygen and thrive on it. They'd drink water, actual water, for pleasure. That's exactly why we should go. He-Jin spoke up, his voice steady despite his racing heart. If we want to understand our place in the galaxy, we need to understand how humans survive on what should be an impossible planet. Mayre nodded, her skin settling into a determined blue. Their biology defies everything we know. They're walking mysteries. And their technology, Taiwan added, all 4 of his hands gripping his datapad tightly. They built civilizations in conditions that should have destroyed them. We can learn from that. Professor Do Young's expression softened. Very well. You 3 will be our first exchange students to Earth. You will study at their Seoul National University for 1 Earth year. He activated a hologram showing Earth's specifications. Your environmental suits will be ready in 3 days. Your training begins tomorrow. As the other students filed out of the hall, He-Jin, Mayre, and Taiwan stayed behind, their eyes fixed on the rotating hologram of Earth. Its blue oceans, white clouds, and green lands looked beautiful and terrifying. We're either going to make history, He-Jin said quietly, or we're going to end up as cautionary tales in next year's survival classes. Mayre's skin flickered with determined gold. Either way, we'll learn something new. If we survive, Taiwan added, but he was already designing improvements to their environmental suits in his mind. They looked at each other, 3 very different beings united by their curiosity about the most dangerous planet known to their civilization. In 3 days, they would begin their journey to the planet that every textbook called a death world, but humans simply called home. Little did they know, their understanding of what made a planet deadly was about to change forever. The landing at Seoul National University's special containment facility was smooth, but He-Jin felt anything but comfortable. Earth's gravity pulled at his environmental suit with frightening force. Even with the suit's advanced support systems, moving required careful thought and effort. Professor Kim Ji-ho waited for them, In the containment chamber, through the transparent walls, He-Jin could see a crowd of human students gathering outside, their faces filled with curiosity. The professor was shorter than He-Jin had expected, but he moved with an ease that seemed impossible under such crushing gravity. "Welcome to Earth," Professor Kim said, speaking through their translation devices. "I understand this must be very challenging for you." He looked at their environmental suits with professional interest. "Those are impressive pieces of technology." Mei Rei's suit let out a quiet hiss as it adjusted to the atmospheric pressure. Her voice came through slightly distorted. "The gravity. It's even stronger than our simulations suggested." "You'll adjust," Professor Kim assured them. "Now, before we begin the orientation, I need to go through some safety protocols." Taiwan activated his data recording systems, all four of his arms moving within his suit to take notes. The professor began listing various warnings, each one more alarming than the last. "Do not go outside during what we call rain without proper clearance. What feels like gentle drops to us could damage your suits," Professor Kim explained. "Avoid direct sunlight during peak hours. Your suits can handle it, but why take unnecessary risks? And please, stay away from the biology labs unless specifically invited. Some of our smallest life forms could be quite dangerous to you." He-Jin watched through his suit's view screen as a group of human students jogged past the containment facility. They wore light clothing and moved as if the crushing gravity meant nothing to them. One student even jumped over a small obstacle, causing all three alien visitors to flinch at such a casual display of physical prowess. "Your quarters have been specially prepared," Professor Kim continued. "We've adjusted the artificial gravity and atmospheric pressure to match your home world. You can safely remove your suits there." As they followed the professor through the halls, Mei Rei's scientific curiosity overcame her initial fear. "Professor, those plants behind the windows, are they not producing oxygen right now?" "Oh, they are." Professor Kim smiled. "Our entire campus is full of oxygen-producing life forms. We find it quite pleasant." Taiwan's suit sensors were working overtime. "The oxygen levels here could power a small city on our world," he noted, his voice mixing with awe and concern. They reached their quarters, a sealed section of the International Students' Building. Inside, the air pressure decreased, and the artificial gravity adjusted. All three students felt their suits becoming lighter. "Rest today," Professor Kim advised. "Tomorrow, we'll begin your orientation properly. Oh, and one more thing." He paused at the door. "You might hear some loud noises tonight. Don't worry, it's just a thunderstorm approaching. Perfectly normal here." After the professor left, the three students looked at each other through their suit visors. He-Jin was the first to speak. "Did he say just a thunderstorm?" "As in atmospheric electrical discharges." "Humans?" Mei Rei said, her voice filled with disbelief. "They live in an environment where electricity randomly strikes from the sky, and they call it perfectly normal." Taiwan checked his readings again. The atmospheric pressure outside is still rising. The storm he mentioned, it's going to be even heavier than this. Through their window, they could see human students rushing across the campus, some laughing as they ran for cover. A few didn't even bother running, walking calmly as water began falling from the sky. "Remember what Professor Do Young said?" He-Jin watched the scene with fascination. "Earth isn't just a death world because of its conditions. It's a death world because its inhabitants have made these conditions seem ordinary." Thunder rolled across the sky, and all three visitors jumped. Outside, not a single human seemed concerned about the noise that could shatter eardrums on their home world. This was just their first day on Earth. They had a whole year ahead of them. 1 week into their stay on Earth, He-Jin decided to attempt something bold. The environmental suit felt less restrictive after days of practice, and he wanted to walk to the library without asking for assistance. It was a simple path, just 50 meters across an open courtyard. The weather display in his suit indicated mild conditions. The crushing gravity remained constant at 9.8 meters per second squared, But He Jin had begun to adjust to the perpetual weight. He started his walk with careful steps. 3 human students passed him, their backpacks loaded with what his sensors indicated were several kilograms of books. They carried this weight with such ease that He Jin felt a mixture of admiration and disbelief. On his world, such a load would require mechanical assistance. The first drops of water caught him by surprise. His suit's external sensors blared a warning. The weather had changed in mere minutes, something the humans called a spring shower. What seemed like gentle rain to the humans felt like tiny bullets hitting his suit. Warning. External pressure increasing, his suit announced. Compensating. He Jin tried to move faster, but the rain grew heavier. Each drop struck with increasing force. The humans around him simply opened their umbrellas or pulled up their hoods, treating the water assault as a minor inconvenience. Then his suit's gravity compensator flickered. For one terrible moment, He Jin felt Earth's full gravity. His legs buckled under the immense pressure. Warning lights flashed across his visor as the suit struggled to restore proper compensation. He tried to call for help, but the communication system had also malfunctioned. Professor Kim, who happened to be nearby, noticed immediately. He rushed to He Jin's side, holding an umbrella over both of them. "Don't move," he instructed through the external speaker system. "Your suit's trying to restart." Mai Ray and Tadwan, watching from the safety of the building, had already activated their emergency protocols. They contacted the university's special response team, designed specifically for environmental suit emergencies. Through his failing systems, He Jin watched in amazement as humans rushed to help him in the rain. They showed no signs of distress as water poured from the sky, soaking through their clothes. Their bodies moved with perfect coordination despite the gravity that had nearly crushed him. The response team arrived within minutes. They quickly deployed a portable gravity reduction field around He Jin, allowing his suit to complete its restart sequence. As his systems came back online, He Jin realized something profound. "The rain," he said later in their quarters, still shaken from the experience. "Did you see how they treated it? Like it was nothing." Mireille nodded, her skin showing patterns of deep thought. "Water falling from the sky, with enough force to damage our suits, and they use it to water their plants." The response team's equipment was fascinating, Tadwan added, reviewing the incident data. "They've developed portable gravity fields just to help visitors like us. They understand how deadly their world is to others, yet they thrive in it." Professor Kim visited them that evening to check on He Jin. "Perhaps this incident helps explain why we emphasize safety so much," he said gently. "What we consider a light spring shower can be dangerous to you. It's not just the gravity or the oxygen. It's how everything on Earth works together." He Jin looked out the window at the now clear sky. "Professor, how do humans do it? Live so casually in these conditions?" Professor Kim smiled. "We don't think about it much. This is simply the world we evolved in. Though I must admit, seeing it through your eyes makes me appreciate how remarkable Earth really is." The incident changed how all 3 students viewed their mission. They weren't just here to study Earth's conditions. They were here to understand how humans had mastered them. Mai Ray stood in the university's Botanical Research Center, her environmental suit's sensors working at maximum capacity. Professor Kim had finally granted her request to study Earth's plant life, though with strict safety protocols in place. "Remember," Professor Kim said, gesturing to a simple potted plant, "even what we consider houseplants can be toxic. This is a common peace lily. Beautiful, but contains calcium oxalate crystals." Mai Ray's analysis equipment hummed as it processed the data. The results made her step back in alarm. "Professor, the chemical compounds in this decorative plant could paralyze an entire city on my world." "Yes," Professor Kim nodded. "Many of our common plants have developed chemical defenses. We keep them in our homes, offices, and gardens." Moving through the research center, Mireille discovered more shocking facts. Every plant she analyzed contained compounds that would be classified as biological weapons in other parts of the galaxy. The humans had labeled these plants with simple signs: mild irritant if ingested, or keep away from pets. Her most startling discovery came when they reached the food crops section. Professor, Myray's voice trembled slightly. These plants you call vegetables. They're actively producing defensive toxins right now. Ah, you must be scanning the tomato plants, Professor Kim replied. Yes, their leaves contain solanine. We just avoid eating those parts. The fruits are perfectly safe for us. Myray's skin shifted to a pale shade of disbelief. You deliberately cultivate toxic plants for food. Not just cultivate. Professor Kim smiled, picking up a ripe tomato. We've selectively bred them over thousands of years to be more suitable for eating. Though yes, many still retain some toxic properties. The Jin and Taiwan joined them later that day, equally fascinated by Myray's findings. They gathered in their protected quarters to discuss her research. Look at these readings. Myray displayed her data. The plant they call rhubarb produces enough oxalic acid to be classified as a chemical weapon. Humans eat its stalks in pies. Taiwan analyzed the data with all 4 arms moving across his screens. The defensive mechanisms these plants have developed are incredible. They had to evolve these toxins just to survive on Earth, and humans evolved alongside them. The Jin added, watching through their window as students enjoyed lunch in the garden. They developed resistance to these toxins. What would kill us merely adds flavor to their food. Myray's research notes grew longer each day. She documented how humans casually handled plants that would require hazmat protocols on other worlds. They planted them in gardens, gave them as gifts, and used them to decorate their homes. One afternoon, she observed a group of human children learning about gardening. They wore thin gloves as their only protection while planting various seedlings. The teacher casually instructed them about which plants were safe to eat and which were just for looking. The most remarkable thing, Myray told her companions that evening, isn't just that Earth's plants are toxic. It's that humans have turned these toxic organisms into food, medicine, and decorations. They've mastered their world's natural weapons and made them into tools. Professor Kim later added her observations to the university's guide for alien visitors. Under the section about Earth's flora, he included Myray's quote, "On Earth, even the decorative plants are deadly, and humans wouldn't have it any other way." The 3 students began to understand that Earth's reputation as a death world wasn't just about its physical conditions. Every living thing on the planet, down to its simplest plants, had evolved to survive in ways that would be considered lethal elsewhere in the galaxy. Taiwan spent another late night in the university's medical research center. His study of human physiology had become an obsession. Through the protective barrier of his environmental suit, he watched as doctors treated what humans called minor injuries in the campus clinic. A student athlete had just come in with what the doctors called a sprained ankle. On Taiwan's world, such damage to a weight-bearing joint would end a career. Here, the doctor simply wrapped it, gave some basic care instructions, and told the athlete they would be back to training in 2 weeks. The human healing process continues to defy our understanding. Taiwan wrote in his research notes, "Their bodies repair damage that would be fatal to most species." Professor Kim arranged for him to observe a physical therapy session. The patient had broken a leg 3 months ago. On any other world, such an injury would require cybernetic replacement. Yet here was the human, walking on the healed bone, complaining only about something they called muscle stiffness. How does the bone knit itself together under such gravity? Taiwan asked the attending physician. The doctor looked surprised at the question. "The gravity actually helps," she explained. "The pressure and stress help stimulate bone growth. We found that humans in zero gravity have more trouble healing fractures." This information stunned Taiwan. Humans not only survived in crushing gravity, but actually needed it to heal properly. He added this to his growing research document, titled Impossible Adaptations of Human Physiology. Later that week, he witnessed something even more remarkable. A student came in with a cut on their hand that exposed muscle tissue. The medical staff cleaned it, closed it with something they called stitches, and sent the student back to class with nothing more than a bandage and antibiotics. "You're not keeping them for observation?" Ta-One asked, his four hands busy taking notes. "For a minor cut." The nurse looked confused. "No need. The body will heal it naturally." That evening, Ta-One shared his findings with Hejin and Mei in their protected quarters. "Their entire medical system is built on the assumption that the body will heal itself," he explained. "They don't even seem surprised by it. It explains how they colonized this planet." Hejin noted, "Imagine having a body that repairs itself while living in conditions that should tear it apart." Mei's skin showed patterns of deep thought. "Combined with my plant research, it's starting to make sense. They evolved these healing abilities because everything on their planet was trying to kill them." Taiwan's research expanded to include cellular studies. Human cells demonstrated remarkable resilience to radiation, pressure changes, and chemical exposure. Their immune system fought off microscopic invaders that would overwhelm most species' defenses. "The most fascinating aspect," he wrote in his thesis, "is not that humans can heal from injuries that would kill most species. It's that they expect to heal." Their entire medical science is built around supporting natural healing processes that they take for granted. Professor Kim reviewed Ta-One's research with great interest. "You've highlighted things we rarely think about," he said. "We're so used to our body's healing abilities that we forget how extraordinary they might seem to others." The next day, Ta-One watched a group of students playing a contact sport on the campus field. They collided, fell, got up, and continued playing. Each impact would have required emergency evacuation on his world. Here, it was entertainment. Perhaps, he wrote in his final notes that evening, "This is why Earth is called a Deathworld. Not just because it can kill you, but because its inhabitants have evolved to treat lethal conditions as mere inconveniences." The university's sports complex buzzed with excitement. Hejin, Mei, and Ta-One sat in a specially protected observation area as they prepared to watch their first human sporting event, a soccer match between rival universities. "Remember," Professor Kim explained, "this is considered a relatively low-contact sport by our standards." The game began, and all three alien students watched in horror as 22 humans voluntarily ran at high speeds under crushing gravity. The ball moved faster than their environmental suits' tracking systems could properly follow. "They're expending enough energy to power a small spacecraft," Hejin noted, his monitoring equipment struggling to keep up with the players' movements. A collision between two players made Mei's skin turn pale with shock. The humans crashed together, fell onto the hard ground, then simply stood up and continued playing. No emergency medical teams rushed to their aid. The crowd actually cheered. "Professor," Ta-One asked, his four hands busy recording data, "are they wearing impact protection suits?" "Just light padding on their shins," Professor Kim replied. "The rest is regular clothing." Another player jumped nearly a meter into the air to head the ball. The alien students collectively flinched at this casual defiance of Earth's gravity. The human landed hard but kept running as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "This is entertainment?" Mei asked, her voice trembling slightly. "They do this for fun." "Oh, this is quite mild," Professor Kim said with a smile. "Wait until you see rugby or American football." The game grew more intense in its second half. Players sprinted continuously, their bodies consuming oxygen at rates that would be lethal to most species. Sweat poured from their skin, their body's extraordinary cooling system in full display. A player fell and scraped their knee on the artificial turf. Blood appeared, actual red human blood. The player wiped it casually with a towel and went right back to playing. "They're bleeding," Hejin exclaimed. "Shouldn't they receive medical attention?" "For a scrape," Professor Kim looked amused. "That's hardly worth mentioning. It'll heal by tomorrow." The game ended with more physical contact as players hugged and celebrated. Some showed signs of what humans called bruising, their internal blood vessels rupturing in non-fatal ways. Yet they all smiled and laughed. Later, in their protected quarters, the three students reviewed their observations. Their idea of entertainment, Mayray said, her skin still showing stress patterns, involves deliberately subjecting themselves to conditions that would kill most species. The energy output was incredible, Heijin added. Each player ran several kilometers under full Earth gravity while maintaining complex tactical awareness. Taiwan compared his readings to galactic standards. According to these calculations, the average player in today's game performed physical feats that would qualify as superhuman on most worlds. Professor Kim visited them that evening to check their reactions. He found them still processing what they'd witnessed. "Professor," Heijin asked, "do humans truly not realize how extraordinary their physical capabilities are?" "Most never think about it," Professor Kim replied. "To us, it's just a game. We play sports like this from childhood. Our bodies adapt and grow stronger because of it." The three students looked out their window at the sports complex, where another game was starting under the floodlights. Humans continued to voluntarily subject themselves to what any other species would consider extreme physical stress. "Perhaps," Mayray suggested, "this is why they've survived on this Deathworld. They don't just endure harsh conditions. They turn them into games." The first tremor caught everyone by surprise. Heijin, Mayray, and Taiwan were attending a lecture when the ground began to shake. Their environmental suits immediately triggered emergency protocols, but what amazed them most was the humans' reaction. Professor Kim calmly stood at the podium. "Everyone, please follow standard earthquake procedures," he announced, as if speaking about the weather. "Remember your evacuation routes." The human students moved with practiced efficiency. No panic, no chaos. They simply stood up and walked toward the exits in orderly lines, following illuminated pathways on the floor. "The building is moving," Mayray observed, her skin flickering with anxiety patterns. "The entire structure is swaying." "It's designed to do that," Professor Kim explained as he guided them out. "The flexibility helps prevent collapse." Outside, more surprises awaited them. The ground continued to shake, yet humans were following designated paths to gathering points. Some even had their communication devices out, recording the event or messaging friends. Taiwan's sensors were overwhelmed. "The tectonic plates are shifting beneath us," he reported, all four arms working to stabilize his suit's balance. "The planet is literally tearing itself apart." "A moderate earthquake," one student nearby commented casually, "probably around magnitude 5.5. The alien students watched in disbelief as their classmates gathered in open areas, some sitting on the ground, others checking their phones. A few were even laughing and taking group pictures with the swaying buildings in the background. Emergency response teams arrived within minutes, not because of panic, but as part of standard protocol. They set up monitoring equipment and began checking buildings with practiced efficiency. "Is this not considered a crisis?" Heijin asked Professor Kim. "Your planet's crust is experiencing a violent movement." "Oh, this is fairly routine for Seoul," Professor Kim replied. "We have about 30 to 40 earthquakes a year in South Korea, though not all are this noticeable. Our buildings are engineered to handle much stronger ones." The shaking subsided after a few minutes. To the aliens' amazement, many students simply returned to their activities once the all-clear was given. Some complained about interrupted lectures or delayed lunch plans. That evening, in their reinforced quarters, the three visitors discussed what they had witnessed. "They build their homes on active fault lines," Heijin said, still processing the event. "They know the ground could move at any time, and they just accept it." Mayray's skin showed patterns of deep contemplation. "Not just accept it, they adapt to it. Did you see their buildings? They design their structures to move with the Earth's violence rather than resist it." The response system was fascinating, Taiwan added, reviewing his data. "They've turned planetary instability into an engineering challenge. And those students, They treated it like a minor interruption. Professor Kim visited them later to check on their well-being. He found them examining geological data about Earth's tectonic activity. Professor, Ho Jin asked, how do humans maintain their civilization on such unstable ground? We learn to live with it, Professor Kim answered simply. Every challenge Earth presents, we study, understand, and adapt to. Earthquakes taught us to build better buildings. Storms taught us to create stronger structures. It's part of life here. The three students shared a meaningful look. Their time on Earth had shown them that the term Deathworld perhaps missed the point. Earth wasn't just a planet of deadly conditions. It was a planet whose inhabitants had turned those very dangers into opportunities for advancement. The Great Hall of the Galactic Academy of Sciences fell silent as Ho Jin, Mei Ray, and Taiwan prepared to present their findings. Their year on Earth had changed them profoundly, and now they stood ready to share their discoveries with the scientific community. Professor Du Young watched from the front row as Ho Jin stepped forward to begin their presentation. We went to Earth expecting to study a death world, Ho Jin began, his voice steady. Instead, we discovered something far more remarkable, a world that created the galaxy's most resilient species. The holographic display behind them showed Earth's specifications. The numbers that once seemed terrifying now told a story of adaptation and survival. Mireille continued, her skin displaying confident colors. Earth's plants contain enough toxins to kill most species in the galaxy. Yet humans have turned these same plants into food, medicine, and decorations. They keep deadly organisms as houseplants. The audience murmured as she displayed her botanical research data. The chemical analysis of common Earth plants caused several senior scientists to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Taiwan stepped forward next, all four arms gesturing at his medical data. Their physical resilience defies our previous understanding of biology. Humans don't just survive injuries that would kill most species, they expect to heal from them. They call compound fractures routine injuries and treat internal bleeding as a minor inconvenience. The presentation continued with their documented experiences. They showed footage of the earthquake, the sports games, and the rainstorms. Each example demonstrated how humans had turned deadly conditions into ordinary parts of daily life. But our most important discovery, He Jin explained, wasn't about Earth's conditions. It was about human perspective. They don't view their world as hostile. To them, Earth's challenges are opportunities. Mireille displayed their combined research conclusions. Humans developed on a planet that constantly tried to kill them. Instead of merely surviving, they thrived. They turned the pressure of crushing gravity into stronger bones. They transformed toxic plants into cuisine. They built cities in places where the ground itself shakes regularly. Their technology doesn't exist despite Earth's conditions, Taiwan added. It exists because of them. Every challenge their planet presented became a problem to solve, a puzzle to master. Professor Du Young stood up as they concluded their presentation. Are you suggesting we revise Earth's classification? Yes, all three responded simultaneously. Earth isn't simply a death world. Ho Jin explained. That classification misses the crucial point. Earth is a forge, a planet that created a species so adaptable that they view lethal conditions as normal. Mireille's skin shifted to show determination. Humans don't just survive on their death world. They celebrate it. They turn its deadliest aspects into sports and entertainment. Our recommendation, Taiwan concluded, is to reclassify Earth as a Class X evolutionary crucible. It's not just dangerous. It's a planet that produces species capable of turning hostile conditions into advantages. The hall erupted in discussion. The implications were significant. Earth's classification had remained unchanged for centuries, but this new perspective demanded attention. Professor Du Young approached the three students after the presentation. Your experiences have changed more than just your understanding of Earth, he noted. They've changed how we view our place in the galaxy. Looking at their fellow scientists' reactions, the three former exchange students shared a knowing look. They had gone to Earth expecting to study what made a planet deadly. Instead, they had learned what made a species unstoppable. As the scientific community debated their findings, Earth continued its orbit around its radiation-spewing star, its humans going about their daily lives, casually defying what the rest of the galaxy considered impossible.